Hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy Podcast Studio. And we are super excited to have Dr. Kourtney Chichilitti back on our show. That's a really big name to pronounce, although I know I'm getting it right because Kourtney has told me over and over again how to pronounce it. I'm finally getting the spelling down, though. It's a tough one to spell. So at least for me, I guess for us non-Italians, I'm guessing it's Italian. Kourtney will have to check us on that one. Anyway, we are going to be Kourtney's been on our podcast a handful of times, and we're just going to have a great conversation. She's a fellow rogue pharmacist. She just recently completely retired from retail pharmacy because she didn't like what was going on inside retail pharmacy. And if you guys have heard me talk before about what happens at most retail pharmacies is pharmacists are really essentially they're copay collectors for insurance companies and dispensers of poisons for big pharma. So without further ado, Kourtney, tell us about that story about why you left retail pharmacy.
I will. Hey guys, how are you? Thanks so much for having me on again. It's always a pleasure.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Yes, I can't believe it. It's kind of surreal still. Friday was my last day, so I'm rolling into my first week as a quote unquote retired retail pharmacist. And, it feels I was in the best place of retail pharmacy too. I was in a mom and pop, small community, that mom and pop kind of feeling. And exactly like what you just said, this isn't what I signed up for 20 years ago. Well, I graduated almost 20 years ago, but we enter this profession to help people and to get into healthcare in a unique way where we can actually make an impact and kind of that liaison between the doctors and patients. And it just becomes a numbers game to the point where you feel like at the end of the day, I was feeling very cringy and cruddy having to lie to people and tell people I couldn't get products in because we would take $50, $100 losses on items that big pharma would not, all these PBMs wouldn't reimburse us. It was just a terrible thing. And we couldn't break contracts. And it was just such a cruddy bad feeling. And it wasn't in alignment with anything that I wanted to do. And during the day, it just seemed like, in addition to having all of these, financial things with PBMs, it was more or less too, as I dispense prescriptions to people, I just watch people get sicker and sicker and sicker in the healthcare system. They come in for one prescription, and the next thing you know, 6 months later, they're on 3 or 4 prescriptions.
Right.
And we're treating symptoms with prescriptions and side effects with prescriptions. And it just is like a vortex that no matter how much we try as pharmacists to help prevent or counsel or get people out of, it's not the way. It's doctors have their 7 minutes with the patients. It's bing, bam, boom. Here's a script. Bye. See you later. And then they're thrown right into the system.
So I'm going to put you on the spot because I know that you can handle it, Kourtney. So give us an example. Give us an example where a drug is prescribed and then we give another drug because of the side effects of that drug. I know there's multiple examples, but give us an example, the first one that comes to your head.
SSRIs across the board and antidepressants. So they start out being something where people will go to the doctor, chronic fatigue, anxiety, I'm just feeling like I'm low energy, whatever. People go to the doctor, they get put on an SSRI. And the next thing
tell us, for the viewers and listeners that aren't pharmacists or medical professionals, tell us what the SSRIs are.
So these are drugs that basically create their serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So basically what they do is they make serotonin kind of hang around in your brain longer so that you feel the happy, the not depressed, the not anxiety. So what happens is when people have these symptoms that maybe might be signs of depression, that people aren't necessarily depressed, they're put on these medications because there's really no medications that treat these things because it's all root cause things that we talk about in functional medicine. It's all healthy lifestyle, healthy living, taking care of the gut, detoxing, all of these, avenues that we go down in functional medicine. So when we look at something like an antidepressant and somebody gets put on one of these medications for something that's not depression, it eventually starts to become an issue with side effects. You see people that they start having issues with sleep, with weight gain, with other, worsening their anxiety or depression, where they're onboarding, 2-3 agents for depression, and they're not even feeling depressed. They're feeling the side effects of the medication where, or they just can't get through the day with fatigue, brain fog. Weight gain is a big one too.
Sexual dysfunction.
100%. That's the biggest one, actually. I can't believe I missed that one. Biggest one. And then the next thing they're coming in for agents too, whether it's Ozempic for weight loss, Viagra, just women just feeling bad about themselves because their libido is low and trying to shift that. It's just, it's terrible.
And don't you have a personal story about SSRIs? Isn't this what kind of woke you up to functional medicine?
100%. Yes. I was on an SSRI for 16 years. When I was in pharmacy school, I was getting panic attacks, not depressed at all. I would just get palpitations, numb hands and feet, shortness of breath, last for 30 seconds at a time. And when I started to get them multiple times a day and had no idea what it was back then in my early days of pharmacy school, went to the doctor and got put on, back then it was brand Zoloft. And I started taking that. And with the exception of when I was pregnant with my son, I went off of it. And then it started back up when I was driving after he was born, went right back to the antidepressant because I didn't know how else to control the panic attacks. And it wasn't until about a year or two into working for mom and pop pharmacy where I started to really dive into supplements and gut health. And I started to learn more about the causes of the root cause of anxiety. And I was able to get off of an antidepressant in 1 week using CBD products without the THC. Tinctures, and then more recently using adaptogenic herbs to stay off. But again, the side effects, low libido, weight gain, just having almost, I feel like I wasn't depressed when I started the antidepressant, but I definitely was feeling different kinds of emotions where I couldn't cry on an antidepressant at will, like it was I wasn't myself. I didn't feel good on them. And I didn't even realize how far in deep I was until I went off of them and realized that I was myself again.
Yeah, they are powerful agents. And, even though they're only indicated, I think FDA approved, you can help me on this one, Janet and Kourtney. I think they're only indicated to prescribe for a maximum of 6 months. Mm-hmm. But people are on them for years. Mm-hmm. And Janet and I, when we travel, we don't have live TV at home, but when we travel, we watch TV in hotels. And, we just recently saw, I don't even know what the name of the most recent drug is, but kind of like what you said, it's another drug that can be added on to your current antidepressant to make it work better. And it's like, you just want to, it's like, seriously? I mean, really?
Well, it's sad because, doing what Shawn and I do with counseling on hormones. One of the recent stories I can share is actually I met the lady and she had her file of her hormone panel, and she had been a nurse throughout her whole entire life. And her doctor wanted to put her on either an antipsychotic or an antidepressant. And, when I talked to her, the problem was she's not sleeping. She's went through menopause and cannot sleep. I mean, can you imagine how exhausting that is? And then on top of it, she's having to be a caretaker part-time for her husband. So here's the deal. Let's just make people zombies, right? Because that's the only answer we have for them. And she's like, no, I'm not depressed. I'm upset, but I'm not depressed, but I can't sleep. And I'm like, if she's telling me that, I'm sure she's telling her doctor that. But never once did they take any labs to look at what was happening with their hormones. And here was a woman who prior to this was very athletic, very sharp, top of her game. And she's like, Janet, this is not help. I need help and I'm not getting it. And that's so sad because then, like you said, first they come in, they listen to their doctor, and then 3 or 4 drugs down the road, and they're getting worse and worse and worse. And it's really hard to be a part of that. I don't blame you. I'm like, good for you. I'm glad you're out.
No, and I love that you said that because it's like a trigger effect. And then, okay, we're hitting menopause, we're shifting with hormones, not sleeping. Okay, now cortisol's off, now circadian rhythm's off. So that's affecting estrogen levels. Estrogen levels are already decreasing. And if you're not doing things to nurture that, you're looking at a plethora of other things. Then people are getting joint aches and pains from their low estrogen. And then they're onboarding their, 800 milligrams of ibuprofen every day. And it's like, it's just every single day watching it happen and just getting frustrated every single day.
and then they get GI problems, gastrointestinal problems from the ibuprofen. So we put them on Prevacid or Prilosec for the rest of their life. It's just, it goes on and on and on. And, I say this, and I used to be a little bit more empathetic maybe to our pharmacist colleagues, but we're not anymore. No, we just say it like it is. If you are continuing to operate in that environment, you are an accessory to the crime. Those are just the facts. And here's one of the things, Kourtney, and you kind of mentioned it when you talked about the biggest reason you got out of pharmacy was probably because of the PBMs, the pharmacy benefit managers and insurance companies. And let's face it, they're the ones that control the entire drug formulary stream. So they're the ones that promote putting people on all these drugs.
Check the boxes.
Right. Because the insurance companies are in bed with the pharmaceutical companies to create a cartel, and they have colluded to create a cartel to rip off the consumer and make the consumer take medications for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm. So I love the topic. I'm sorry I'm interrupting, but I love the topic we're talking today about the importance of nutrients, because I think that is poo-pooed a lot, because it's not usually something that doctors are reaching for or grabbing for to help heal. So help us understand why omega-3s are important to some root causes.
I think omega-3s are one of the biggest things overlooked. And in my opinion, this may be a pretty bold claim, but I'm going to say it anyway. I feel like this is something that should be checked in at every, doctor's appointment along the way when we're doing cholesterol checks. To me, an omega-3 level, an omega index, omega ratios, I think that's more important to check than a cholesterol level, which, we can dive into that and how those numbers can be skewed and really what is the true value of that level. But to me, looking at an omega index, and I was wowed a couple years ago, I think I was recording a podcast with a nutritionist friend, and the bold fact of the podcast was, if your omega index, which is just a regular blood test that can be taken from a finger prick, if your omega index is less than 4, you have the same cardiovascular risk factor as a current smoker. And that blew my mind. To me, I was like, it's true. And so many people don't get the right omegas in their diet. When we look at the kind of omegas, where we're getting it from, the fish that it comes from, kind of maybe the not as popular, delicious fish, the smash fish, sardines, mackerels, anchovies, things that people don't get a lot of. And if they are, what's the source of the fish? Are they coming from a good, place where there's not other toxins and bad things in them? So right off the bat, that's something that people aren't getting. But then looking at, circling back around to drug nutrient depletion, how every time somebody onboards another drug, how we're using all of these different nutrients in our body to metabolize drugs, and we're kind of messing with our gut microbiome and absorption and metabolism. So it's so important. And then adding on the new, I think, buzzword out there now is seed oils. I think people are starting to really dive into seed oils and how terrible they are, and how they're in everything that's a packaged seasoning, dressing, so many things are made from these, and how bad they are for us. And then looking at that, that's where like omega-6 and 3 ratios come into effect, where we're looking at, we want more of the omega-3s, the healthy omegas. And a lot of times that ratio is way, way out of balance in the American diet.
Yeah, for sure. And it's pretty hard, I think. I'm not necessarily a fish fan. Janet's Norwegian, so she loves fish. I think it is pretty difficult to get omega-3s in your diet, in a regular diet, unless you're trying to eat the sardines and things like that. That's why I think it's just easy to supplement with omega-3s. And I think it's important to get a good supplement. And there's a lot of science behind this. In fact, 30 years ago when pharmacists were recommending omega-3s, of course, the FDA and Big Pharma were just talking about how it was, witchcraft and voodoo and snake oil salesmen. Omega-3s didn't have any benefit, yada, yada, yada. And then Big Pharma comes out with Lovaza, right? I mean, which is just, their playbook is so small. It's just incredible. And Lovaza, for those of you that don't know, is a prescription-based omega-3, and drug companies knew they worked so well that they put out their own and charged $500 a month instead of $30 a month. So, and the problem is I don't know the details off the top of my head, but the problem is Lovaza doesn't have the ratio of EPA and DHA like you need to in a good fish oil. So that's that. But also, on this go ahead, Kourtney.
They still play insurance games with Lovaza, with charging people and not letting them cover it, or they'll pay for brand Lovaza and they won't pay for like a generic substitute. They still play games with it. It's like, it's obscene. I can't believe it.
And it's just, why would you only pay for the brand name? The only reason you'd only pay for the brand name is if the insurance company is getting a kickback. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just, what is happening in healthcare, and it's not just pharmacy, but what is happening with kickbacks that physicians get for prescribing rates of XYZ drugs, whether it be vaccines or whether it be, how many people are on statins and all that. The kickbacks that happen in healthcare would be illegal in any other industry. And yet it happens all the time in healthcare.
Well, sometimes go ahead.
No, it does. Go ahead and you go.
Well, sometimes I think you'd be better off being a pet in the United States, because when we talk about the omegas, we had an Airedale that had skinny shoes, some food allergies, which I seriously think there was some reasons for that, but I won't go into that right now. But our dog would not take a cheap omega. He wouldn't.
No.
And he was a big dog. He was,
he would eat rabbits.
He would eat anything, right?
Mice,
and
but he wouldn't eat
he
cheap
would
omega.
leave it in the bowl. So
spit it out.
The reason I'm going down this road is that we know not every product is equal to one another. So give us, our viewers, some good tips on how to find a quality product, because I think we're just overwhelmed. You walk down the aisle and it's like there's a plethora of things there. So what should somebody be looking for a good omega?
I love that you just said this, because that's another thing. You bring awareness to supplements for people, but again, not all supplements are created equal. Not all fish supplements are created equal. So I always recommend people use the higher quality brands. And most of the times you're not getting those higher quality brands when you go into I won't even name any of them, but I won't even give them the satisfaction, but the larger corporate places, whether it's a grocery store, whether it's a pharmacy, a lot of times you're not getting that. Even when you go to some of I'm not sure what you guys have available. We have like Whole Foods that are more of like the healthier food stores, but I think they're all owned by like Amazon and stuff. So,
right.
So I'm not really sure to say where to go. But for me, I always love when people, like when I worked at the pharmacy, I would always have it was like our section that was like these are the ones I recommend. And then we had the cheap generics that people didn't want to hear about it or didn't care and shopped in. So I always did my homework and research on companies. The first thing I do is looking at their source and making sure that they're not using, heavy metal fillers, making sure. One of my favorite brands is Orthomolecular. They put their products up against prescription drugs. They will put their bergamot up against Lipitor 10 milligrams and say, hey, in this clinical study, these are the facts. These are the numbers. They went down when, a patient used this versus, a prescription medication. They'll put they'll stand by their product that hard to say our products work. You might pay a little bit extra. If you want a cheap supplement, you're getting what you paid for, basically. It's pay the extra few bucks for it. Always ask for recommendations and so that the source and use good quality products. It's just on
fish oil. And our dog knew it very well, because dogs have a sense of taste and smell a lot better than ours. But if the fish oil smells like fish and it stinks, it's because it's rotten. So
it was rancid.
It's rancid.
Yeah.
I mean, and our dog wouldn't eat it. It was amazing. It actually surprised us.
Yeah.
But it also told us how important quality is. And we actually had one of our pharmacists do a little taste test and actually bite the capsule of fish oil. And with the cheap brand, she almost threw up.
I believe it. I believe it. And
because they're rancid.
One of my favorite fish omega supplements is Nordic Naturals. Their products are so good, and none of them smell. Like, they don't have like one inkling of a fish odor. And like you said, it's just amazing. When you have a quality product, and that's in an omega product, that is the first thing to look for.
Nordic Naturals and Orthomolecular, as far as I know, are they are the only ones
process.
that use the same manufacturing process with their fish oil to keep the triglyceride backbone in there, to make it absorb well, and that's it goes to show with their products, because they don't smell like fish. So I want to go ahead, Kourtney. I want to go back a little bit.
No, they don't. They don't smell at all.
So going a little bit off topic for omegas, but we're still going to be on the topic of nutrition. Nutrition is you've been following RFK Jr. in the news lately, correct?
Yes.
Right. And so I have some hope in America. So you and Janet and I, we've been talking about how important nutrition is for a long time. And you mentioned, how bad seed oils are. And, for the first time, we have a very prominent political figure that is standing up and saying big pharma and big food is corrupt, and they're making our population in America sicker. I mean, I got to tell you, I always have hope because I just know who wins in the end. But this gives me hope that, really we're finally coming down to, Jan, I don't sound so crazy anymore when we tell our pharmacy colleagues, no, drugs are not the answer to most chronic disease. Oh, yeah, look at the studies on blood pressure and cholesterol and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, no, I don't care what studies say. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And people are getting sicker. What we're doing is not working. Mm-hmm. So we need to do something totally different. So I don't know if you can speak on that, what your thoughts are about the future of America, not just RFK Jr. necessarily, but just what we, how our food and big pharma has really corrupted and made our population sicker.
No, absolutely. I was actually just having this conversation with my dad earlier today. So it's funny that you should say this, because exact conversation. And it was the same thing about having hope, because it's almost like we just sweep all of this under the carpet. It's like, it's right there in front of us. It's right there in front of us. And I don't want to say I'm guilty of it too, because I think that there's so many things that we do out of convenience, right? So we live in like a right now, we want it now kind of world, and everything is quick, fast, easy, on the go lifestyle, yada, yada. So whether it's anything down from, the EMFs that are coming off of our phones, to the water we're drinking, the air we're breathing, and all of the crap that's put in our food, it's real. It's very real. I'll give you an example of walking. We were walking the dogs the other night, and the cornfield that's like diagonally across from the house is this huge field, and they were spraying it, which, I mean, it just smelled like a bottle of Roundup. Like, it was just terrible. We're walking. We're like, I guess we should turn around right now. And we walked back, and we're like, we're talking about it. And we were just talking about crops and how, like, that's all going into the ground. And my boyfriend has well water at his house. Like, so that getting sprayed diagonally across the street is going into the groundwater that's going into the well water. And it's like, well, what are we going to do? And that's a whole nother topic of itself, of like, water and good source water. My favorite is hydrogen water. But taking things and taking it to the next level and saying, like, that's just one water. The most abundant thing that we put in our body is tainted with toxins. We look at the different foods that we're eating, whether we're trying to eat products that, don't have gluten, something that causes so much inflammation. But it's like, is it the gluten, or is it like I just said, the glyphosate and all the toxins that are in the wheat products that we are putting in the products that are just there? It's just anything with a wrapper on it has these toxins in it. And it's like, to some extent, this is what these are our options. And then even when we are eating things that are organic fruits and vegetables, things are wrapped in plastics, and it's just becoming the natural way of doing stuff. This is how we do it. This is our food supply. And that's just like looking at it from like just not even scratching the surface to all of the terrible things that are out there that are really, really, garbagey things that people are eating, the foods in schools that kids are eating, all of these things. So, the fact that it's being brought to the regular mainstream so that people are seeing it and it's becoming a quote unquote political topic, I think that's huge. And it does give me hope. It's like, wow, it's like I talk about this stuff to people all the time. And a lot of times people look at me and roll their eyes and like I'm some kind of like woo-woo weirdo, but but it's real, and we can't keep turning, a blind eye to it. It's like we wonder all the time, how many did they say I forget this one study that they said about kids with autism, a study by like 2026, more than half of the population of children under the age of 5 will be diagnosed with some kind of spectrum disorder because of the toxins in the food that we're eating. And it's like, we just keep, why is everybody getting cancer? Oh, F cancer this and blah, blah, blah. But like, look at what we're putting in our bodies. Like it's a wonder that more people don't have these issues,
Yeah, I agree. So coming back to our topic, I think omega-3s are used on so many different places as far as disorders. We talked about my dog he had allergies and skin disorders and things like that, and it made a huge difference. And his vet said, this really calmed some of the issues down. And of course, food and diet was the main thing, which is strange because, that's the first place a vet goes, is what are you feeding your animal to bring around these skin problems, right? So, we kind of mentioned that, but what other things are we using omega-3s for?
I find mostly like cardiovascular things. I feel like when I see patients, both from the pharmacy perspective and in my functional medicine practice, when I'm in my functional medicine, when I do labs, the first thing when I run my basic panel of labs is we look at an omega index and we look at an omega ratio, and most people are low. And a lot of times that comes hand in hand, and not to kind of like get off of like the topic of your question, but like a lot of times we also see markers where people have different issues with dysbiosis. So a lot of times is it that people aren't getting all of the omegas, or is it that they're not absorbing them and utilizing them properly due to, gut microbiome issues? Because, all of these things that we just talked about, all of these different factors and oxidative stressors that affect our gut, whether it's physical, actual strength, emotional stress, all of these different toxins in the world that can mess with our gut microbiome. I see leaky gut all the time in patients, and that can present as so many different things. It can present as diabetes. It can present as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, different neurological issues. That's big with omegas too, ADHD, different spectrum disorders, focus. So I feel like not sure like what stems from that, but so many people are low in it, but we see most of the time when I see that low omega index, there's other GI issues going on. Like I said, whether it's dysbiosis, leaky gut, malabsorption, that kind of thing.
Well, if you don't have a healthy GI, you can't absorb your nutrients from, food, and you got to fix your GI. And speaking of that, is it, when you mentioned that omega-3s can be used for skin, can be used for brain health, cardiovascular health, I think it's just a reminder that in traditional medicine, and Janet doesn't like that term because she thinks it's really not traditional.
It's part of history. That's it.
Right.
Sorry.
But we have all these specialists, whether they're a cardiologist or whether they're a urologist or whether they're a neurologist, whatever. And, they just take care of one small part. And I had a good colleague say that there actually should be called partialists instead of specialists. But using omega-3 as an example and what all it can do, it's just a reminder that our bodies it's all related. Everything, whether it be our urinary tract system, whether it be our GI system, whether it be our brain, whether it be our pancreas, all of it is related. And over again, it really comes down to nutrition and inflammation. And if you have, a good diet, with some of the stuff we discussed, and, it lowers your inflammation, your overall body is going to be healthier, and that includes your brain, that includes your heart. When you look at people with type 2 diabetes, for instance, it's no wonder that they have, that they're obese, and then they have cardiovascular issues, and they have kidney issues, then they have eye issues, brain issues, all these things. What is it related to? It's related to their diet. By the way, diabetics do not lack a medication. It's a dietary issue. Type 2 diabetes is a dietary issue and can be fixed with a diet. Anyway, there's my rant.
No, absolutely. I love your rant. And I love when you say that, when you say you're not lacking, you're not short in a medication. And that's so true. And that's another condition that in the pharmacy, so many people just getting put on metformin and just over and over and over getting diagnosed, and I air quote, diagnosed with diabetes. And it's like, it's not a disease. They're symptoms. They're treatable symptoms. It's reversible. And, it's very frustrating, very frustrating.
And I tell people, because there are doctors, there are endocrinologists that literally say that type 2 diabetes is not reversible. And I tell people, and I'm very vocal about it, if your doctor tells you that, get a new doctor.
100%.
It is very reversible. I mean, it is largely a lifestyle, disease. And just per definition, it's a carbohydrate metabolism problem. So if you do have diabetes, and even because some people say, well, I'm not overweight and I have type 2 diabetes, so diet won't matter. I'm like, okay, then don't eat carbs. Don't eat carbs and see if diet doesn't matter. Of course, your blood sugar will go down. So it's a perfect example.
It is. And it's just another one of those things. And then, to just kind of put icing on the cake, pardon the pun, looking at Ozempic and all of these, the GLPs, like everybody now, like they started a program at the pharmacy, and that was becoming the hot, thing to do. And so many people coming in, and I don't think it even hit them, the side effects. Like there were some people that were starting to come in with like GI side effects, and again, leading to like the clumps of hair loss, the skin aging issues, and things that like they started seeing. But I feel like so many people are not, this is going to be a big problem. All these people that are turning to these quick, fast, easy solutions to lose weight. And there's going to be so many health issues resulting from this. I'm starting to see it. I was starting to see it, but I think it's going to explode.
But then again, Kourtney, it's all in the greater plan from Big Pharma. Use a drug to create toxicities, and then have a drug that treats those toxicities. It's just all part of Big Pharma's plan. I mean, they've been doing it for years. We already talked about ibuprofen and Prevacid, Prilosec. Notice that, the H2 antagonists like Zantac and Tagamet, they didn't come out until after the NSAIDs came out. Gee, wow. You think that was planned? Absolutely. I look back now. I mean, we have been played for so long, and we just kept letting it happen. And I have hope that, with RFK Jr. speaking out about big food and big pharma, and how, the agencies are captured, the government agencies are captured, that I have hope that at least getting the conversation out there is, going to wake some people up.
I think it is. I really do. And just having hope, because this is something that's never really been a thing before. It hasn't been a platform, or, I don't even want to call it political, but just that it's in mainstream and it's in the media and it's being talked about. I feel like in the past, when it's been talked about, it's almost been talked about like fake news, it's
right. I get it. I know.
Like,
that's why.
We're making the food in the cafeterias at school healthy. We're on this,
Yeah.
whatever. I don't know what administration that was. Was it the Obama administration where it was like, all
I think
about
so.
kids' healthy lunches? But like, I don't think that that's not healthy. Like, I don't seeing the things that are in schools and just anything that's packaged and not fresh and I don't know. Like maybe they're there, but it just seems like the results aren't there.
No, of course. I was communicating with somebody earlier today, and there was a list of foods that I saw that green, yellow, and red. And in the yellow in the green was, I believe, was Cheerios.
Oh
in the red, right. In the red was ground beef and eggs, which basically says don't eat them. It's like, and I'm gonna say this, and as we wind this podcast up, is over the course of the last 4 years, as you can imagine, Kourtney, a lot of us in healthcare, our opinions have, if they haven't changed, they've been made much stronger. We knew that there was a scam going on, and then COVID exposed it even more. So even though at first it made us look more crazy, now people looking back and say, wow, these people weren't so crazy. But here's let's just rationalize this about this entire topic. So let's face it, humans thrived. Humans have thrived on Earth for thousands of years. We were the apex predator for thousands of years. Did we have vaccines 1,000 years ago? Did we have high blood pressure medication, diabetes medication 1,000 years ago? Did we eat a lot of red meat? Did we eat a lot of eggs? Did we eat a lot of dairy? Did we eat Cheerios? Did we eat Lucky Charms? No, we didn't. So let's just think. If we thrived thousands of years ago, then how could we do it without those things? So if you're believing a lie that you have to be on medication to be healthy, or, your doctor tells you to moderate eggs because they have high in cholesterol, or saturated fat from animal products is bad for you, red meat, get a new doctor. But just think about it rationally. What did your great-great-great-grandparents do? Mostly ate red meat and dairy. They didn't eat anything out of a box. And they probably didn't get cancer, and they, probably didn't get cardiovascular disease. And sure, there's exceptions to that, but it's not like there definitely was not 50% of America was not obese 100 plus years ago. That's for sure. And obesity related disease kills more people than anything in America. Anything. So there we go.
Easy. I remember seeing, I think it was at the beginning of the summer, somebody posted a picture of like the beach swarmed with people. And I think it was
in the 70s. I've seen it.
70, right? It was in like 1970 something. And there wasn't one overweight person in the picture. Yep. Every woman had a bikini on and looked good in it. Like it was like,
and all the men looked lean. They looked healthy. They had their shirts off. They none of them were obese. It's just how it's changed in 2-3 generations is amazing. And just as a little side note on this topic, you may have heard this. I've seen it come up a couple of times. I actually saw an interview. Janet and I were listening to a podcast, Tucker Carlson podcast with Casey and Callie. She's a Stanford trained doctor, and she got out of residency because she just couldn't believe what she was seeing. Just over and over again, you see the same thing and nothing to really treat the person to fix the problem. She was an ENT doctor, and she got tired of she realized after doing the third sinus revision surgery on somebody, it's like, this is not working. Anyway, I can't remember their last names. They talked about how, our government basically talked about in the 70s, started talking about how smoking was bad for us. And they came out about that. And it changed the cigarette companies. They people stopped, and it changed Americans' habits. More people stopped smoking. Less people were smoking, right? And so what did the tobacco companies do? Because they realized that, their source of income their revenue was going to hurt. So what did they do? They bought out big food companies. RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company bought out Nabisco. I think that's the company they bought out. Anyway, tobacco companies started buying out big food companies, and they used their scientists that understood how to deliver nicotine the best way to addict people. They used their scientists to do the same thing with food.
I didn't know that.
Right. Is it interesting? And it all makes sense now. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but think about it. It totally makes sense now. And, you talk about the seed oils. I was looking at some ingredients the other day in a store in a bottle of something. I can't remember what it was. First ingredient was, I don't remember exactly the seed oil, but some kind of seed oil, canola oil or something. Second ingredient was high fructose corn syrup. Right. I mean, can you call this food?
No, and I think,
seriously.
I think what the problem is, and I remember I did a reel on Instagram with this a while back, and it wasn't more so like if you're trying to lose weight, looking about counting calories, and like you said, like not eating things that are good for us, like red meat, because, it's bad for your cholesterol. I think it's more like always look at the source,
Yeah.
I think that a lot of our meat is not good. It comes from bad places. It's being pumped with hormones and things that aren't good and healthy for us. But I think essentially the red meat at its core is so good for us. It's been around forever. That's what people have been eating since the beginning of time. And it's like looking at the stuff that's put into things, preservatives, hormones, same thing with any kind of thing that's in a package, like you said, a dressing, it's not food. It's doing terrible things to our bodies. And it's not even like people look at it from the perspective of, let me count the calories, or let me count the sugar, or let me look at how many carbs are in here. And if you would shift your mind to not look at it that way and look at how many things that are hormone disruptors, that when you put them in your body, these things that act like xenoestrogens and just chemicals that the body has no idea how to process or do it. That's why people create, white fat and hold these toxins into their body, not because you're eating too much red meat.
Right. Well, and I think one thing people have to understand too is that, we can't get away from all the toxins. We just can't. Whether you try to go organic or whatever, you try to go grass-fed beef, all that, you just can't do that. So, but our bodies have been created very, very well to get rid of toxins if we treat our bodies well. 100%. So the more stuff that the more good inputs we can put into our body, our diet, movement, sleep, get outside, get sunlight, those kind of things will help us get rid of some of those toxins that we're just going to always be exposed to some kind of toxin. And that's okay. We've got good liver. If we have a healthy immune system with good livers and kidneys, we can get rid of those toxins. So, and I think this is what I say if people want to have generally the best diet. Here's one thing that Janet and I do is that we buy our beef from a local rancher.
Love it.
And so we know how it's fed and we know how it's treated. And that's a majority of our calories. Probably 70% of our nutrition comes from the beef that we eat.
That's great.
So the other things, that might have some toxin, and we don't necessarily eat organic. And I've had a podcast on organic versus non-organic. And there's debate on if organic is better or not, honestly. But the reality of it is we're going to have, if we eat mostly something that is, nutritious for us, good for us, and we know where the source comes from, the other things are just going to, if we do get into some toxins, we can our bodies can deal with those. So that's what's important, is that don't worry too much about, like you're talking about the xenoestrogens and all that. Don't worry about that as much as you worry about what your main source of food comes from.
Yeah. And I always look at it too with people. I always tell people, to live by the 80-20 rule. You can't live in a bubble. You can't not do these things. And that's the thing that I preach too. Like you can't not do all of the things. Everywhere you look, there's going to be some kind of toxin. However, our bodies were super designed to do this. The liver is an amazing thing, but that's what I do in my work is I work with my patients very, very detailed to say, okay, we look at some labs that are pointing to different things, but we make sure not only that the liver, we're supporting it and supporting the gut to make sure that our liver can work properly, but making sure there's not liver congestion. A lot of times people's lymphatics, if you're not active and you're not doing all of the other things to keep things moving along, this is where disease happens. This is where the bad things happen. So this is where lifestyle is super important to have all of the other things going so that your liver can do the job, so that your gut health does stay good, and to do all the things to support it. We have to do the things to support it or it doesn't work right.
That's absolutely right. So, Kourtney, as we wind this podcast up, tell us what you have a passion for.
That is my biggest passion, is to just bring awareness to people. I think that you don't know if you don't know, and so many people don't know. So the fact that it is coming to light where we're starting to talk about all of these things that are in our food supply and learning how to properly, sort through things and recognize that they're there and how do we navigate through. So I love to help people with that. I love to just show people a healthy way and to look at all these toxins and, even down from water source. My latest passion is water. I dove into the hydrogen water, fix, craze, whatever you want to call it. I dove down a rabbit hole that I couldn't get out of. Mm-hmm. I did a water test and I found the bad things that were in my healthy water supply, and ionized water. It's just antioxidants down to the cellular level, hydration. So I have been working with a lot of people on that, just looking at, the ways that we can help our bodies function properly, and down to the most abundant thing we're putting in our bodies, water. And, just guiding people through their own wellness journeys. Everybody has, a different story and, different needs in their body. So I love to dive in with people and, help them navigate healthy lifestyle.
I love it. So tell us about your website.
My website is wellness-solutions.co. On there, you can apply to work with me. You can look at all of the cool things that I do. There's a bunch of different examples of labs that I run, in addition to different products that I love and recommend. My favorites across the board, but just in general, whether it's coaching, labs, lifestyle recommendations, working one-on-one or in groups, you can kind of find it all. Now that I am not at the pharmacy anymore, there's so many great things that I have that I can't wait to roll out and get going, different group programs and classes and courses. I've just been, limited with my time, but now that I'm here full-time doing the functional medicine thing, I'm so super excited to share so many great things with people. So stay tuned.
I love it. Our goal is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. And you've definitely helped us realize that goal. So thank you so much, Kourtney.
Thank you so much for having me on. As always, a pleasure to see you and
chat. I'm sure we'll keep in touch, and I'm sure you'll be on again.
Thank you so much.
Yep. And listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in Thursday to our midweek podcast, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Torquil Ferrara is going to be on our show. He wrote a book about curing disease, and it's going to be great to have him on our podcast. So tune in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Thank you for tuning in today.